This is Office Talk with Annette Stepanian. Hey there, thanks for joining me for another episode of Office Talk. So, how often do we go ahead and start a business because we have maybe a passion for something, we're driven by the talents or skill sets that we've acquired, and we realize, maybe I could turn this into a business and actually make money off of it? What better way to have a job doing what you love every day and getting paid for it? But then what happens is you realize working and having your own business is not always about doing what you love day to day. There are so many different aspects to running a business, not only just the craft and that skill set that you've developed, but you have to pretty much learn to develop like an MBA. You got to handle the legal stuff, obviously, your finances, your taxes. I kind of think of those as like the trifecta that people just do not like dealing with. But fortunately, there are folks like today's guest who help make all of this stuff a lot easier to understand so that you can not be a slave to your business. You can actually make your business work for you. So in today's episode, I got a chance to chat with Shanna Skidmore. She is a business strategist and financial coach for creative entrepreneurs. So there were definitely points in the interview where I was like, me too. We just had so much in common, both in terms of our philosophy and our perspective, but more importantly, with what we do. We are both striving to make really complicated things like law and finances and all that jazz really, really easy to understand, and then to deliver it to you guys so that you can continue to take your business to that next level. As you find out in this episode, there are only a very few things you really need to know, and once you know them, you'll find that it's really not as complicated as you'd imagine. So with that said, let's go to the show. Hey Shanna, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here.
We have been wanting to talk for quite a while, so I'm so happy that we finally have the chance to sit down. I really want to pick your brain because I know you work a lot with creative entrepreneurs and helping basically get them to take control of their business. But before we dive into all of your wisdom, why don't you bring the listeners up to speed on like who you are, how you got here, what you do, and all that good stuff?
Okay, great. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited we got to sit down. So I'm Shanna Skidmore. I'm a business strategist and financial coach for creative entrepreneurs. So my background is in finance and psychology degree, and then I almost have an art minor. So I didn't take art history because everybody told me it was boring. So I didn't take it. But other than that, and so I always say, I always felt like I was all these different puzzle pieces that never could find one puzzle. And I really didn't know exactly what my calling was. And I started in finance and working in personal finance, helping with financial planning, retirement planning for small businesses. And I did that for 5 years. And then I got married, and my husband was like, I said, if you could do anything you want to do, what would you do? And he said, I would design and build airplanes. And I said, okay, how do we do that? And he said I would have to go back to school. I said, okay, I'll go anywhere but Atlanta, Georgia. And funny thing is, Georgia Tech is the number 2 aerospace engineering school in the country. So Georgia Tech it was. And we moved a month later after having that conversation. We quit both of our jobs and moved to Atlanta on a crazy dream. And he started going back to school. And I started working for a fashion designer, a startup fashion designer in the Atlanta area. I worked with her on her finance and operations, and it was just she and I really. And so I got to do all the business side, and she got to do the creative side. And that really launched my journey into consulting with creative entrepreneurs, because it showed me that there's really very few things in a business you have to get right. But until somebody tells you what those things are, we feel like we're trying to do everything. And so over the last 6 years, I've been working with creative entrepreneurs, trying to simplify all the things and help them focus on the very few things that really have the power to make them profitable and sustainable while also living the lifestyle that they desire. And so that's really my mission in everything that I do. And I love, I used to say, if I could just take women to coffee and talk about life and dreams, that's what I would do. And it's funny because that's really my job now. So it really is a huge blessing, and I'm thankful for it every day. And I just now I'm working how can I help more people? That's the question I'm always asking myself. How can I make this teaching more accessible, more understandable, really simplify the financial conversation, because that can often be very scary and overwhelming. How can we simplify that and really just teach business fundamentals, really, but things that aren't taught in art school or that are often just unknown, So it's a really cool. I'm really thankful for what I get to do.
Yeah, and I had so many like bells and whistles going off while you're talking, because there's so much I want to dive into, and I get it. I mean, I feel the same way with the law. It's like so much about it is like simplifying it to like those few things that you really, really need to know in order to protect your business. And I can't imagine. I want to talk about all of the things that you're like, there are only a few things that you really need to know to have a profitable, kind of well-balanced business. Do you mind if we just dive into those? Because
Sure.
I want to hear, I want to hear all about it and want to make sure that I'm doing them.
Yeah. So I wish I had a list right in front of me, but I'll off the top of my head. But it really started, with working with my fashion designer. I started seeing these patterns: overwork, underpaid, pricing was off, where you didn't really understand costs, and so they didn't really understand how much money they were making, for my fashion designer on each garment. And you would think, oh, that blouse is $300, they're probably making a killing, but really the cost was just right up there with it. And so it was unsustainable. And we've all heard that most small businesses don't make it to 10 years, right? So that's that. Everybody says that. And so I started doing research. Well, what is that number, and is that true? And the statistics are kind of all over the board, but I came to about 70 to 80% of small businesses won't make it to 10 years. And then I said, okay, let's take that a step further. Why won't they? Why? And I found that most of the reasons are financial. So I'll just quickly run through those. So a misunderstanding of cost, not understanding what it really takes you to run your business, but also to produce your goods. So not understanding cost, not planning ahead financially. So, everybody can, especially in the creative industry, we understand in the wedding industry, it's very seasonal. So there's times where we feel like millionaires, we have so much money in the bank. And then there's times where it's like, I don't know if I can make it through the next 3 months. So one of the biggest reasons businesses don't make it is just they don't plan ahead for those slow months, for the seasons. So that was a big one. A misunderstanding of taxes, not really knowing to save for taxes, which taxes they need to pay, income tax, sales tax, just kind of nobody really helping understand taxes, and not planning for taxes or saving. The whole question, do I pay quarterlies? Do I not? And a lot of this ties, and that really right into law. How are you licensed and set up? So a misunderstanding of pricing, not knowing why you price the way you do. A lot of times I see people just price because that's what they think people will pay. It's a very emotional decision instead of calculating the price based on profit. So some really simple and key things, but I always say they're simple but not easy until somebody says you need to plan for these 3 types of taxes, or if you need to have 3 months of savings for slow seasons, you need to price at this margin to hit the right number. Until somebody tells you, it's very, very hard. But if you were to sit down and just go over the few things, how to track your cost, how to price for profit, to create, margin, which margin, I always get this question. My friend says, I thought margin was a setting on Microsoft Word. And so margin is just, what capacity is or what our price is versus what our cost is. There has to be money left over. The leftover is what is called margin. So, pricing, so there's left over, and then knowing why we have to have leftover. So again, just pricing, cost, planning ahead for cash flow, understanding that it's seasonal, and then knowing which taxes you need to understand and plan for are 4 simple steps, not easy steps, but 4 steps I talk about a lot: cost, price, planning, and taxes.
Yeah, it's funny because I had a jewelry line in between when I left my law firm, and then I started doing what I do now. And I had no idea about this stuff. I always talk about it where I'm like, yeah, like here I was, like, my dad's a CPA, like, I kind of grew up with these things, and I still felt like I had to go through that education process. And oftentimes when we're running businesses, whether it's a product-based business, a service-based business, we go into it because of the passion that we have for the craft and the talent. But what we fail to recognize is we need to almost get like a little bit of an MBA. I don't say that you have to actually go to get an MBA, but you need to have these basic understandings, and then just have the basic understanding and then find those people who can come in and help you with it. But you can't just delegate this, and so whether it's finance, taxes, law, whatever, you have to have that fundamental understanding in order to be successful, in my humble opinion, because I've had some and not others, and you feel the pain.
I think that's so true. I mean, I have some people that are like, gosh, I do so well with my personal finances, but I can't get it with my business. Or it's like we have the knowledge out there, but sometimes you just don't know how to sift through it to know where to even begin. And that's really what I try to do in what I do, where I focus a lot on systems and financial things, just really kind of help all the things, that are good to know versus the things you have to know. And in finance, it doesn't have to be as hard. It's just we sometimes have to figure out how to simplify it. Same with law. I'm sure you feel the exact same way. I think, there's so many things to think about. It feels really unknown to me. But if I just knew the 5 I had to know, it would be really, really helpful. So I'm glad that you shared more of your story. That's so cool to relate to have jewelry, because again, I think that's so true. I see that a lot. People start because they have a passion. I call it the dreamer phase. And it's like you have this adrenaline because you're so excited and you're starting a business and you're just doing it out of passion. And then I think there's this pivotal moment where you have to decide, do I want this to remain a passion project or something that isn't really putting money in my pocket as I would like to see? Or am I ready to put these systems in place and learn a few things financially, kind of put in some hard work to learn the things, but to really make this into a profitable, sustainable business? And it's okay, whichever one. I always want people to have permission to choose either. Your hobby, your passion doesn't have to be a business. It can be something that you do just for fun. But I always think people have to get tired enough or hungry enough to make those hard choices.
And I think when you start a business with a passion first, what happens is you become so close to the product or the service that your identity is kind of caught up in it, and it becomes so personal that it becomes painful at times, and you start resenting it a little bit. At least that was my experience, because I wanted to create jewelry that was made in America, of high quality materials, of all these things. And it's expensive to do that. And it's hard, it's tough. And you have to figure out, like to your point, what is the purpose of this in my life? Is it for it to put food on the table, or is it for it to be its own art? Is it for it to be an expression of myself, or what? And you need to figure that out and kind of take that personal aspect of it away and just realize, at the end of the day, this doesn't define me. It's just business at the end of the day. Okay, so if we know, this stuff is important, and it all sounds great when we're sitting here and we're chit-chatting, but what's one thing that somebody can do today if they want to take control of their business, if they want to not feel like they're living paycheck to paycheck, or, they file their taxes and realize, holy crap, I owe all this money. What's one or two things they could start doing today? It's a new year, that they could just start implementing and putting in those foundational steps so that at the end of the year, they have more control.
Yeah. Goodness, so many things came to mind when you asked that. I did want to point out, I love what you just mentioned about what is the purpose of this business. I think that seems like a very simple question, but a question we often don't ask ourselves. And I think it's almost a fundamental, we need to start here. What is the purpose of your business? What is success to you in your business? Is it money? Is it time? Is it the creative expression to do your work? Is it impacting others? When we really know what our purpose is, that is really how we define what our next steps should be. So let's say, to answer your question, that somebody says, I really want this year for my business to pay me a paycheck. Okay, so then I have kind of maybe 2 suggestions. First of all, the easiest way to feel in control of your money, and this again seems very simple, but if somebody hasn't done this, I would say this is step number 1, is just to go get a separate bank account for your business. I don't know how advanced the audience is, but I have people that are 7 years in business that are still using their personal bank account. And, the thing about this is it's not It is important for taxes, it is important for legal, but besides all that, those points, just to feel in control and to know where your money is going, to see that this was business money, this was personal money, it's going to give you so much clarity. I always say, even if you can just deposit a check into your business account and then immediately transfer it to your personal account, I don't care, just to see that money go into your bank account, it's going to help people automatically understand, wow, I didn't realize I was spending so much. And it's going to help when you're filing taxes at the end of the year to see every deposit in your business account. It's going to tell you total sales and total expenses, which is going to make bookkeeping and tax records so much easier than digging through all those receipts. So that would be step number one, would be a very simple step. But step number two, I think, would be to go back and review your past 3 projects, either products you created or projects you worked on, services, whatever, your past 3 completed projects or products, and look through your bank account and see what that actually cost you in materials. And then if you have a record of time, that would be really great to see how much time it took you, or even if you have to estimate it.
And I just want to pause you there because I think the time factor is something that I know I didn't consider when I was doing the jewelry, right? I had a very good record of, what every single Swarovski crystal cost me when it was set into the necklace or whatever, but I never factored in my time. And I think that is probably, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a huge mistake that people might be making, is they are undervaluing their time, because if you had to hire somebody to come in, you would have to be paying them at least minimum wage, if not more, if it's a different type of skill set. And you're not paying yourself that because you're just like, okay, you need to at least factor that into the price so that later on when you are ready to bring on people, you're not like, crap, I need to raise all my prices to factor that in.
Huge mistake, Annette. You nailed it. And it's not easy to do. So I use Toggle. It's a free app, Toggl. I don't know, Annette, if you do kind of resources at the end, but Toggle. It's a free app that's a time tracker. You can have it on your cell phone. You can have it on your computer. It's just a start and stop timer. And you can put a description of what you're working on. You can even add projects or clients. So you can see, I worked this many hours for client ABC, whatever. I would say tracking my time saved my business. When I used to work one-on-one with clients before I created my program online, that's what saved me. I began charging like a monthly set retainer fee and for a scope of work kind of. And I realized that scope of work took me about 4 times the amount of hours that I estimated. And so I was making like $0, negative dollars when you really look at it. And that's what I see with every business owner that does any kind of service. We never estimate our time. We play 2 roles in our business, and we kind of need to see ourselves as 2 different people. I say we wear the worker bee hat, like we're the worker, and we're also the CEO. We are the worker when we're doing our projects. For Annette, like when you were creating your necklaces, doing that hand labor, you are the worker, and you have to get paid as a worker because you said it so perfectly. We have to act like that role might be replaced one day. And so we have to estimate into our pricing, what if we had to hire someone or outsource that work? Until we have priced in labor, we are underpriced. And so the worker bee is our first hat. That's the hat everyone forgets. We see ourselves as the CEO, and a lot of times we think, well, I'll get paid from the leftover. I'll get paid when it's all said and done. I'll get paid the profit. So that can go good or that can go really bad for the CEO. So we get paid just kind of what we can when we can. That's what I see a lot of people doing, but we forget that we're also the worker. And until we track our time as the worker, and I always say use a rate that you would have to use to outsource that work. And if you don't know, if you're an art, I have a lot of artists who are like, well, nobody can paint like me. Totally get it. You can't really outsource that work. Then you need to use kind of a minimum wage, $15 to $20 an hour number, and track your time, because our cost is made up of materials, actual cost, but also labor. And so just maybe thinking about that, I always find it helpful to think about, am I the worker right now or am I the CEO? And we have to get paid both ways.
Yeah, I love that. So I want to go back to when you said you were tracking your time and you realized you were spending a lot more time into your packages than what you had budgeted in terms of the fees. So what do you do in that situation where, okay, you're like, you go in, you get all your costs in there, you factor your time, and then either the hourly rate or the cost, the price for the product seems so outrageous. And you're like, well, I don't know if in this market would pay for it. And I see that a lot, especially I think with artists and creatives, sometimes they feel like maybe people don't value that as much in terms of like putting a price on it, It's not like food that we have to eat food, right? And I could see how a painter might think, well, this came easily to me and I painted it, and, they try and kind of justify a lower price. So what do you do when you do the calculations and you realize, wow, the price might be a little hard for the market to bear?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's such a great question. And I do have this program called Pricing for Creatives, which covers a lot of this, not to like plug it, but
no, we'll definitely link up to your stuff.
Yeah, if people want more information, like this is a great topic. And so something I talk about in the program is, what do you do? It's not just the answer isn't always just raise your price. In fact, it hardly ever is 100% just to raise your price, because that's true. We have to price so that the market will sustain it. I think it's very, very important to first get the data. I always say price is just a guessing game until you know cost, until you know what your material costs are and your time. And so what do we do if we see, like me, I'm making $0? It's a factor of two things. We need to raise our price to the price point that would be profitable, again, if we were paying someone else for that time. But also a lot of times we need to decrease our cost. So really figuring out how to either increase our price, but that can only go up so much. I usually recommend not increasing price more than like 10 to 15% at a time. So kind of have a goal in mind, but up it over time. So 10 to 15% increments. So increase our price, but a lot of times it comes back to decreasing our cost. So material cost, you can maybe buy in bulk or get smarter about, maybe I don't have to use that particular product. My clients would find this one just as valuable. And so really evaluate my material cost. But for me, it was time, cost of my time. And so in that situation, it's either we work faster, which is often what we think we can do. I'll just work faster and I'll just work. But really, it's about how can we outsource some of that time and make it. So for photographers, a lot of time I talk about this with editing or culling images. A lot of times you can really cut editing time in half by outsourcing to an editor to at least help them cull your images or get started. So how are some creative ways to outsource time? For wedding planners, something I talk about is not offering unlimited meetings, but maybe one meeting per week. So you can put a cap on the hours commitment. For floral designers, or anybody doing proposals, I see a lot of time wasted in revising the proposal. And so how can you have an initial proposal and then get back together instead of every time, oh, that groomsman can't come or my grandma can't come, let's take that boutonniere off. Let's get back together 1 month before the event and do all the revisions at one time. So it's about just getting creative of how to decrease your time commitment. And for me, when I was working, I just realized that the price point for all these hours can't be there. I can't decrease my hour time enough. So that means I just had to revamp my packages so they didn't include as many things. Instead of doing, these 10 things in 1 month, we focused on 3. And my clients valued that just as much. We really have to set that expectation with our client. But again, just to summarize that, so increasing price, decreasing cost, it's usually a factor of both to get to that profitable price point.
Yeah. And I think one thing that you said with the whole toggle thing that might be a good exercise for folks is keeping track of like where they waste their time probably and I want to say spend their time, but realistically probably waste their time. Because I know I probably need to do that exercise shortly because I think I waste my time on things that just aren't as valuable to my business, even though I love it because it's like a quick win, like on the to-do list, it's like a quick hit. I can like cross it off and I feel so good about myself. But reality is it's not really moving my business forward towards the goals that I've set for myself. So I love that, like kind of keeping a tab on where you spend your time, but then also how you can find creative solutions to either outsource, eliminate things that really just are a waste of your time. Nobody needs to be doing them. And I know Tim Ferriss has a quote in his book, The 4-Hour Workweek. It's something like, you first need to eliminate what you don't need. You need to then automate what you can and then delegate. So like basically get rid of the busy crap that you're doing, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, something I talk about in my program, online program, the Blueprint Model, is I have these 4 quadrants of activities, tasks. And so there's this exercise of, it sounds like Tim Ferriss kind of does a similar thing, but if you could put all your tasks into one of these quadrants, and if I can remember off the top of my head, the 4 quadrants, like, so gold would be you enjoy it and it's productive. It moves your business forward. What tasks are in there? Then it's mundane. What are things that have to get done, but you hate doing them? That would be like bookkeeping and those kind of things. And then there's one that's just for clutter, things that really aren't moving your business forward and really you just need to cut those. And then the last one's inspirational, and one I think we forget often as business owners. I think sometimes as creatives, we struggle with like, can I do that? It's not moving my business forward, but it's inspirational to me. And I think you need to make space for things that also just are to inspire you. And so,
like listening to this podcast.
No, I think it's very, very important. Education, painting something that's just for fun, doing those kind of things. I think it's very, very important. And something we often think, like, if I just could cut that out, and I'd work so much better.
Yeah, I love that, because I know for myself, I need to have that inspiration as part of my almost daily agenda, that I need to, whether it's listening to a podcast, whether it's watching some video on YouTube or reading, like I need that. That gives me so much energy. And so I try and incorporate it into my morning practice as much as I can. Some days are better than others, but I do feel the difference. Like when I haven't had that, I just operate very differently.
Something I saw that I was I'm going to say wasting with air quotes, if you could see me, but wasting time doing was being on the phone. You know, it's really, you could be more productive if you have email and you just bust out what you need to say. And so for a while, I kind of eliminated phone calls, and I was just taking care of things on email and those kind of things. But I realized that when I talk to a client, it gives me energy. It makes me excited for the day. So I always make sure I have one phone call a day to give me that inspiration.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's super important. So if you could distill kind of what is the like main mindset shift that people need to make, what would that be? I mean, you talked a little bit about being the worker bee and, you know, the CEO, but you have worked with so many entrepreneurs, and there has to be kind of this like aha light bulb moment where you see that twinkle in somebody's eyes. What is that mindset shift that they're making?
I think that it comes back to deciding, I mean, as cliche as it sounds, but as what success is for them. I think that that's super, super important to start making that shift of what I want out of this business and why am I doing it? And it gives you permission to pursue a business model and to move forward with things that are based on what you want out of it. You know, for some people, you might just be a mom who needs a creative outlet in addition to just loving your kids well, you know? And so knowing that, you don't want to put the pressure on it of making bukus of money and creating all these systems and hiring staff. You just want to let it be free and easy, as opposed to somebody that really might be motivated by creating an empire. I have a friend of mine who she just loves having and leading a team. She doesn't even really care what her business is. She just wants to be an entrepreneur and she wants to have a team. And so knowing that she's going to build her business model differently, for me, when I first started, I was looking into, I really love venture capitalism. I'd say, like, think about Shark Tank. I wanted to be one of those people investing in other companies. So I was becoming like an investment banker. I was going back to school and going to get into venture capitalism. And my biggest motivator was Kyle. At the time, my husband was in school and he was doing a co-op where he was 6 months on location at this co-op and then 6 months back in Atlanta for school. And I knew that I would never be with Kyle. And so I said right then, I have to create a business that will allow me to build it no matter where I am. We have moved 11 times since we got married 6 years ago, and it's insane. I forget my address all the time, but I love that I was able to build a business that allowed me to travel. I can speak wherever. I can have all my phone calls I set up were video chats from the get-go. And, if I hadn't defined that in the beginning, I wouldn't be happy where it is today. Does that make sense? So
It totally makes sense. And I think what's also important to realize is it can change. Because I know even just like a few years ago, my priorities were really different. And then once I got married, my priorities shifted by choice. Certain things are more important to me today than they were
exactly.
5 years ago.
I talk about these core motivators, like figuring out what your core motivator is. I mentioned them a little bit before, like time, money, creative expression, impact, and that shifts based on the season that you're in. For the past 5 years, mine has been time. I've had to have a lot of flexible time and the ability to travel, to be with Kyle, because that was what was important for me and the lifestyle I wanted with my family. Now, we're settling down in one location. It's going to look a lot different. So now I feel like it's shifting to impact, where I, again, ask that question, how can I help more people? How can I really get in front of more faces and help change this mindset? And so I think what you said is really true. It's seasonal. And knowing that will allow you, I have creative businesses and friends of mine who are about to have babies or just had babies, and I think, is slowing down. Am I going to get left behind? And just realizing that there's a season for all those things. And if you plan for that and you prepare, we really can do amazing, amazing things just by intentional planning and deciding what we want. I think so often what I saw in the finance world when I worked in finance, creative entrepreneurs are very often overlooked. Maybe thought, oh, they won't make money, or, everybody thinks of like doctors or attorneys, like they make so much money, but creative entrepreneurship has amazing potential. And I think sometimes we take on someone else's view of success, having a team, running this big corporation, making this kind of money, and really oftentimes that's just not what we really want. So I think really taking the time to ask yourself what you want, creating a plan to get there, and understanding that can change over time based on the season of life you're in.
Yeah. And I know you recently took like a pretty long sabbatical traveling the country. So how did you prepare for that? Because so much of, we get into business and we're like, oh, this is going to be so great. I'm in charge of my own schedule. But what ends up happening is we're working all the time, and for reasons that we talked about earlier. But how do you plan for something like that in your business? I mean, you've touched upon it a little bit, but it seems so scary just to leave everything for like 3 months or 10 weeks and then, can you talk about like what you did to prepare?
So let me give you a little bit of backstory before I share about our long sabbatical. So I started my business in 2013 officially. So I was working with creative entrepreneurs since 2011. And then I worked with a fashion designer and then a floral designer, and then was like, I should figure out what this is and how to price it. And so officially launched it in November of 2013. So 2014, I took on my first kind of official clients with that retainer package. And I want people to know, like, I was where most of my clients were, where I find most of them. I was working crazy hours. I took on way too many projects because I was trying to hit a number that we needed. I paid our bills, and so I knew what I had to make, but I wasn't priced appropriately. And I was staying up at least once a week through the entire night. At least once a week, I was eating saltine crackers and Diet Coke at like 3 a.m. And I gained 15 pounds in like 4 months. It was insane. And I was just like, this is chaotic. And so I finished my first round of clients in like 6 months. So I took them on in January, it was June, and I was like, I have to stop. This is insane. So I took the whole month of July off. I called it my summer sabbatical, only out of, honestly, Annette, out of necessity. Like, I had to. I was literally exhausted. I was so burnt out already. I was like, something's got to be different. And I realized that sabbatical, when you take time out of your business, it allows you to get a lot of clarity on your business. And it wasn't this epiphany moment of sabbaticals are great and I'm going to take one. No, I took it because I had to, just to live and make it through another day. But I realized that it was such an integral part of my business. Every time I take a sabbatical, I come up with my best ideas. I come up with new systems. It's just a time of really getting out of my business to work on my business. I mean, honestly. So I took that first sabbatical in July of 2014. And then I was like, I would really love to do that again in December, because who likes to work in December? Nobody. No. So I took December off. And so that's just been ever since then, for the last 3 years, July and December, I've taken sabbatical. And now I just preach about it. Like, you have to do it. There's this TED Talk.
Yes,
Yeah.
I was just,
Okay,
I
you're gonna
totally
have to
know what you're
link it
talking
in the
about.
show notes because I can't remember it. But it's this
I am.
guy, Steven or Stefan, or I think is
Yeah, the
it
graphic designer
works.
guy,
He
right?
said, why do we wait until our oldest years of life to retire and take like all this time off and do nothing, So he decided, instead of waiting, he was going to intersperse, or I don't know what that word is, between his retirement into his working years. So he works, I think, 4 years and then takes a whole year off or something. And I watched that and was, gosh, that is genius.
Genius,
So,
right?
anyways, this year, Kyle graduated, and we've kind of had this big 5-year journey. He graduated, I started this business. So we just wanted to take this big time to celebrate. How can we just celebrate this really big? And so we planned a 3-month road trip out west and up into Canada, and we camped and we called it the National Park Tour. And so it ended up being 10 weeks on the road, and from the end of July to October. And honestly, the crazy thing is, it just takes the decision to do it. So we sat down with our calendar. We said, okay, when are we taking off? And mark those out. I tell all my clients now, get out your calendar at the beginning of every year. I have so many clients who are like, why am I working New Year's Eve? Oh, I'm working on Easter again. And, if we just had sat down and marked our calendar, that would have been different. We would have known, you know what? Nope, I'm not working that time or this time. So, and then we have to know our need. What did we need financially? We needed 3 months of expenses. How can I go ahead and plan to save that? So if I have 6 months to plan that means I need to add an extra $1,000 or $1,500 a month. So really, it seems super, super hard. But if we just sat down and made a little plan, let's mark it off on our calendar. And then financially, what do we need to plan for? How do we save that money? Well, we just put all that money into a separate savings account. And we knew that this is the money we're going to live on while we're gone. We created a whole budget for like supplies, because we had to buy a tent and a box for the top of our car and little things like that. And so honestly, we took 3 months off, and it cost us less money than our general 3 months living. And I think sometimes I have this exercise, I call it a dream boat exercise, because everybody talks for whatever it is. What is that one thing that you always dreamed about? Is it a boat? For me, it's a cabin. I've always wanted a cabin. I just love that. I want a cabin. And so we always say, I want that. We dream about it. But how often do we sit down and say, well, what age do I want that? And how much would that actually cost me? And then how can I break that down into annual payments and save for it? And really, when we take the time to really define what we want, give ourselves a deadline to get that, and estimate the cost, we really can plan for those things so much more than we thought. I have a friend right now who's taken the entire month of February off, and they're going to Hawaii. They're living in Hawaii for the entire month of February. And it's so cool. And she said, Shanna, that all came because of this dreamboat session where I got to say, well, what do we want? And how much would that really cost me? When would we want to do that? And when you break it down into monthly or weekly or annual savings, it really is more possible than you think. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. You can make, you don't have a set salary. There's not an income cap. Figure out how to make an extra $500 a month or something. So
yeah, there's so much. I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's just so much I want to talk about there. And I love it, because I love that you mentioned that TED Talk, and I will definitely link up to it, because I remember sitting on my baby blue couch in my studio in San Francisco when I was still at the law firm. And I was watching that TED Talk, and it was such an aha moment in terms of just like challenging assumptions. Like, why do we have to wait until 65 to quote unquote retire? Why can't we interject that through our experience, every, few years? And I did the same thing. I was lucky enough that they gave me a sabbatical at the law firm. But basically, I had all this vacation time that I hadn't used. So they were like, just go use all your vacation time. And I just think it's so valuable because otherwise you just feel like a rat on a treadmill. You're just running to nowhere. And just everything you said, I totally copy, paste, bold, italicize, underline. I love it. And it's just start challenging your assumptions. And I think part of the reason why I like Tim Ferriss, whether I agree with him or not, is he challenges these things that we just take as just, that's the way it's supposed to be. Yeah. And he questions well, why, he even talks about how can you live that lifestyle that you always think about having, later on in retirement? Why can't you do it now? And to your point, you have to have a plan in place for it. That's I think the second piece of it, but I love it. I love it. And you're a living example of it. So it can be done.
It can be done for any creative entrepreneur. A lot of times I get a little bit of pushback because they're like, well, Shanna, you're a financial consultant. And, I'm not maybe quote unquote a true creative. It was funny because this December, I actually worked quite a bit because I was relaunching my program, the Blueprint Model, in January. This is the first time I launched it in January. And so because we took this 3 months off, July through October, I was like, okay, well, I'll work December, right? And it was hilarious because I kept emailing my clients like, hey, can you send me this? Okay, can you work on that? Hey, can you? And every single time I would get this auto responder, I'm on December sabbatical. And I was like, ah! And so it was hilarious because I was like, why did I do my job so good? But I have seen photographers, florists, artists, abstract artists, and so many different creative entrepreneurs take sabbatical because when you sit down and you really look at your calendar, we all have slow months. We all have off months. We all have months where we need to be home with our kids. We all have months where we just don't want to be working. I have a floral client right now who sat down and she set a minimum for her clients, but she realized May and October were her biggest months. So she doubled her minimum on those months just because she sat down and said, those are my biggest months. And then I'm going to take June and July off because I booked nothing. And so with just a little bit of paying attention and looking at what's really happening, I think it's so easy to take a month off, easier than you would imagine in a creative business. And honestly, to answer the follow-up question I always get, well, what if somebody inquires? Won't they get mad, that they're not going to hear from you for a month? Honestly, when people can't get you, it just makes them want you more. I find that so, so true when they're like, yeah,
like dating, right? You don't pick up the phone right away.
But it is true. I find that you put up an autoresponder. We're on sabbatical. We will get back during this week, and you might lose some, but those probably weren't your clients in the first place. So it's easier than you think.
It's like you got to 80-20 your business, and if you do that, if you figure out where is that 20% that's bringing kind of 80% of the revenue, or you can kind of trim the stuff that's not necessary and focus on the stuff that's really bringing you the biggest return on your investment of time and resources. So, oh my gosh, so much good stuff. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad we finally got to talk because I knew you were going to shed so much.
Yeah.
You're on sabbatical. I have to wait.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So I just like to cap off my interviews with folks asking one final question. And it's one thing I know for sure is, and I ask you to fill in the blank.
About it. One thing I know for sure is that creating a profitable, sustainable, life-enriching business is more possible than you think. And it takes just a few simple steps.
Awesome. And you lay out all of those simple steps in your programs, which I'm going to link up to in the show notes. So if people want to get to know you better and take a step further in figuring out how they can take control of their business, they know how to get in touch with you. So Shanna, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. So there you go. I'm sure you totally related to Shanna as well. And some of the stuff that she talks about being able to design our businesses in a way that works for us. So whether that means you want to take a sabbatical, whether that means that you only want to work a certain number of hours a day or take on certain types of projects. I just love the notion that we can do that. We just have to plan for it. And before I sign off, I wanted to read a few lines out of one of my favorite books. So yes, I am totally getting nerdy with it. It's a book that I have mentioned before in prior episodes called The E-Myth Revisited. It was given to me when I went to Rick Mulready's conference a few months ago, and I literally devoured the whole book on the plane ride home. So I just wanted to read the few passages because I think it really helps you shift what your purpose for your business is. It says, "Don't you see? If your business depends on you, you don't own a business. You have a job. And it's the worst job in the world because you're working for a lunatic. The purpose of going into business is to get free of a job so you can create jobs for other people. The purpose of going into business is to expand beyond your existing horizons so you can invent something that satisfies a need in the marketplace that has never been satisfied before so you can live an expanded, stimulating new life. The point is, if all you want from a business of your own is the opportunity to do what you did before you started your business, get paid more for it, and have more freedom to come and go, you're greed. I know that sounds harsh, but that's what it is. Your self-indulgence will eventually consume both you and your business." And I love this. And if you want to dive more into the book, I'm going to link that up in the show notes, but I have definitely not figured this out. To be honest, right now I am currently recording this and it is about 7 o'clock in the evening. So I have to learn how to set my own boundaries and to design my business to work for me versus me working for my business all the time. However, my point here is really to be aware of that and to understand that there is more to life and there's more to this whole journey that we are all on than just work. And if we can figure out how to utilize work and business as a tool to living a more enriched life and becoming a more fulfilled human being, then in my book, you have definitely cracked the code and I will love to talk to you. With that said, I want to wrap up. If you want to grab the show notes, you can find those over at AnnetteStepanian.com/podcast/25. In the show notes, you'll find links to things we talked about, including links to how you can get in touch with Shanna. So with that said, I'm going to wrap up here. I'm going to shut the office door, go have dinner, and I'm going to catch you here next week, right? I can't wait to hear more about what you're doing. If you want to continue the conversation, make sure to join the Facebook group, and you can find links to that over in the show notes. I wish you a fantastic morning, noon, or night, wherever you are in the world and whatever time of day it is for you. And I can't wait to talk to you later. This is Office Talk with Annette Stepanian.